Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Curtains Up, the podcast where we explore the stories, history, and moments that shaped theater into what it is today. I'm your host, Rohan, and in today's episode, we're traveling back over 400 years to one of the most important and transformative periods in theater history, the English Renaissance. This was the era that gave us some of the most famous plays ever written and introduced audiences to complex, realistic characters and completely changed what theater could be. It was bold, emotional, creative, and honestly, kind of revolutionary. From crowded public playhouses to legendary playwrights like Shakespeare and Marlowe, Renaissance theater didn't just entertain people, but it redefined storytelling itself. So let's step back into Elizabethan England and explore the era that shaped modern theater forever. The Elizabethan era, which lasted from late 1500s to the early 1600s, is often called the Golden Age of English theater, and for a good reason. This is the moment when drama evolved from the simple morality plays into stories that actually explained real human emotions, flaws, and inner conflict. Instead of characters that were purely good or evil, playwrights started writing people who felt real. People who struggled with love, jealousy, ambition, power, even identity. Things that audiences could actually relate to. Playwrights like William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Ben Jonson completely transformed what theater could be. Shakespeare especially gave us characters who overthink or make terrible decisions, or people who question everything. And honestly, this makes them feel very human. His characters don't always do the right thing, and that's what makes them interesting. While Marlowe, on the other hand, pushed boundaries. His characters were intense and ambitious, often chasing power or knowledge no matter the cost. His plays explored what happens when ambition goes too far. And Ben Jonson brought in satire and humor. He used comedy to call out society's flaws and made audiences laugh, while also forcing them to think. Another huge part of what made these plays so powerful was the language itself. The writing was incredibly poetic, and it was filled with rhythm, emotion, and even imagery. Sometimes the words themselves were just as exciting as the action happening on stage. I mean, just think about it. Shakespearean English is one of the most studied topics in drama today because of how much poetry was inside the writing. And what's amazing is that even though these plays were written over 400 years ago, the themes still feel relevant today. Because people are still dealing with the same emotions, people are still making the same mistakes, and people are still asking the same questions about who they are and what really matters. Now, here's a really interesting fact. Before Shakespeare became the most famous playwright of all time, there was actually a group called the University Wits. These were highly educated writers who studied at universities like Oxford and Cambridge. They brought ideas from ancient Greece and Roman drama and adapted them into plays that worked for English audiences. Some of the most important members of the University Wits included Robert Greene, John Lyly, Thomas Kyd, and Christopher Marlowe. Thomas Kyd, for example, wrote The Spanish Tragedy, which became one of the most popular and influential plays of all time. It helped establish the revenge tragedy genre, something Shakespeare would later build on in plays like Hamlet. Marlowe was especially important. He was actually considered Shakespeare's biggest rival. His plays, like Dr. Faustus, believed bold characters and powerful language, and many historians believe he could have become just as famous as Shakespeare. But unfortunately, his life was cut short when he died at just 29 years old, ending what could have been an even greater legacy. What also made this era exciting was the incredible variety of plays being produced. Audiences could see tragedies, comedies, and historical dramas, sometimes all written by the same playwright. One week, you might watch Romeo and Juliet just leave completely heartbroken. And then the next week, you'd see A Midsummer Night's Dream and laugh the entire time. And then after that, you might watch Henry V and experience a dramatic retelling of English history. Theater wasn't limited to one type of story. This is the main factor that's different from any type of theater before this era. It usually stuck to one drama, whether it be comedy in Commedia dell'arte, or religious focus in the Dark Ages of theater, or even back to Greek theater, where it was either a tragedy or a comedy, from written by one playwright. In this era, you could get all sorts of theater. And here's something really important. Theater was for everyone. Playhouses were public spaces. Wealthy nobles sat in the upper galleries, while everyday people, who were called groundlings, stood right in front of the stage in the pits. And everybody watched together, regardless of social class. And unlike modern theater, audiences were loud. They reacted constantly. They laughed. They cheered. And sometimes they even booed. This type of theater was different. It wasn't quiet or formal. It was energetic, interactive, and alive. One of the most famous theaters of this time was the Globe Theater. The stage extended outward into the audience, which meant actors were surrounded on three sides. There were trapdoors, balconies, and even a painting ceiling. There were trapdoors, balconies, and even a painted ceiling called the heavens. Now, because there wasn't much scenery, actors had to rely heavily on their voices. They also had to rely on their movement and focus on the audience's imagination to help bring the story to life. Now, here's something that might sound unbelievable today. Women were not allowed to perform on stage. Nope, that's not good. Now, here's something that might sound unbelievable today. Women were not allowed to perform on stage at all. Every single role, even characters like Juliet, Ophelia, and Lady Macbeth, was played by fully male actors. Often, these roles were performed by young boys whose voices hadn't fully changed yet. They trained specifically for these parts, wearing wigs, makeup, and elaborate costumes. And audiences accepted completely. It was just normal theater at the time. It wasn't until much later that women were finally allowed to perform professionally. Actors also faced legal challenges. Without the protection of a noble patron, they could actually be arrested for being unemployed or labeled as vagabonds. This meant that theater companies needed wealthy sponsors to survive. Shakespeare's company, known as the Lord Chamberlain's Men, had royal support, which allowed them to grow and succeed. So, when we look at the big picture, Renaissance theater laid the foundation for modern drama as we know it. It grows much more than just Shakespeare being the best writer at the time. This era introduced complex, realistic characters. It elevated language into something poetic and powerful, and it created immersive theaters and interactive audiences. And, most importantly, it showed that theater could explore what it truly means to be a human. The influence of this period is still everywhere today, in modern plays, in modern movies, and in modern storytelling itself. And that's why, over 400 years, the legacy of Renaissance theater is still alive on stages around the world. Thank you so much for listening to Curtains Up. I hope this episode helped you better understand how this incredible era shaped the future of theater. And as always, stay curious, stay creative, and I'll see you next time when the curtain rises again.